We were stupid teenagers. The both of us. We met in the park down the street from my house after talking to each other online for a few days. One day, we talked about who we were and got to know each other. In 2 weeks we were dating. We had a wonderful relationship together, with a lot of happy and beautiful memories. I was in love with her, and even after it happened, I believed that we'd be together forever. She had a lot of problems with her parents. Her father was a dunce who was never around and stole money from her mother so that he could support his drinking problem. Her mother was a substance abuser who neglected all 3 of her children and made money from selling substances. All of this was not from word of mouth either. I saw all of this happen firsthand, and yet, I never knew about it when I first met her. At first glance, she was a sweet and kind girl who didn't know any better than the life outside of the house she lived in. She never told me about anything that was going on until after we were dating. Growing up, I had an abusive father who would do all sorts of nasty things to our family, which caused my mom and I to move away from Mississippi to a new home in Australia. So in this way, I could understand her situation. When I learned more about her, I figured I could help her somehow avoid her horrible family life. In a way, I thought of it as fixing myself by wanting to help her out with her problems, which buried me deeper into the relationship. She began inviting me over to her house, to watch movies. I'd invite her over to mine to share stories, and I'd take her out to the park to get away from her home life. We would hug and kiss a lot, and it was a joy. Eventually, we started getting more and more intense. It was fun. I was 16 and I had never been with a girl like that before, so it bonded me closer with her. This continued and we kept seeing each other like this for several months. She was a virgin as well, and so neither of us knew what we were doing, which made it all the more memorable. On Valentine's Day we bought each other gifts. Then we went to her house together and decided that both of us were ready to lose our virginity to each other, and so we did. Everything was going great. I got a job, good grades at school, and an awesome new life in Australia away from my dad. I was happy. Then one day, my girlfriend's dad came back. And once he came back, he stayed. She expressed to me in private about how nervous she was for him to come back. I remember first meeting him. He was very skinny and pale with long wavy, greasy hair. He shook my hand and told me it was nice to meet me. He didn't prove to be any better than my own dad. One day, a few months later, my girlfriend appeared in front of my house, sobbing. I ran outside and held her as she cried on my shoulder and told me he finally did it, he finally hit me. As if she was expecting it all along. I was furious. After that, she changed, like someone flipping the switch to a light bulb. It was as if she turned into a whole different person. She began listening to heavier, darker music, she became more depressed, she stopped coming to school, and she wanted more intimacy. One day, she didn't come over to my house in the morning so we could go to school. I was going to go by myself when I got the hunch that I should go to her house instead, even though I'd be totally late for class. I went over to her house and was greeted at the door by her mother, who showed me to her room. She was laying there, asleep under the sheets in her dimly lit room. Though she looked quiet and peaceful, I could feel that she was broken. I was going to wake her up, but after seeing her, I decided to just lay in the bed and hold her for a while. As soon as I wrapped my arms around her, she held my hand and caressed it. She had been awake for a while now. I felt so sorry for her. She was usually always so ironically happy, but now she was the quietest I've ever seen her. We lay there for about 8 minutes and then I told her, "Come on, it's time to go to school," and pulled her out of bed. She groaned and told me that she didn't want to go, that she wanted to lay in bed all day and cry. I told her that school is better than this old house, and finally, she agreed and got up. A few weeks later, we were on a date in the park. I remember we were laying on the ground looking up at the trees and talking when suddenly she jumped on top of me, straddling me and looking into my eyes, flirting with me. I looked back at her, confused, and I remember matching her gaze when something clicked. I realized that I was not looking at the same girl I had met 6 months ago. Her father hitting her had changed her beyond recognition. She wanted to fool around in the park, something that she would never normally do. I could tell she was hurting inside. Broken. Trying to find some way to cope. I knew what she wanted was unhealthy. So I said no, and we packed up our bags and left. I walked her home and she invited me inside for a bit. We went straight into her room, and right away she slammed the door shut and pushed me down onto the bed. I laughed as she climbed onto me. I thought she was joking. That is, until she started to unbutton my pants, then it got serious. I pushed her off and told her to wait. I could tell that this time was different from all the other times we had done it. She didn't want to do it out of love, but rather out of pain. I could tell she was hurting, crying out for help, and this was her way of dealing with it. I knew it was unhealthy, so I told her no, this isn't right, and walked to the door. She pushed me down onto the bed again and got on top of me. "If you love me, you'll let me do this," she said, as she started pulling off my pants. I immediately realized how insane that sounded and stopped her again. "Whoa. Hold on, stop. We can't do this right now, I'm going to be late." And yet she continued. I pushed her off of me once more, and she yelled at me, "Come on, I'm really stressed out, I need this. Stop being so difficult." Finally, she was on me once more, and so I just let her have her way. I didn't know what else to do. I felt so powerless and so ashamed. The whole time I said nothing and I didn't look her in the eye. And I have never told anyone about it except my best friend, who told me that it wasn't good, that it was SA. That's right, I am a guy who was SA'd by a girl. Since then I haven't told anyone this. Not even my parents know about it, and I don't think they would believe me either. I was so ashamed about it, not only because I am a guy and guys usually don't let this happen to them, but also because it was someone that I loved and trusted. Afterward, we were never intimate again. A few weeks later, she started sleeping over at my house. She had told the police about her dad, and so she had to stay away from him for 2 weeks. On the way home, she told me about a guy she was seeing. I joked with her about Peter and that maybe she should buy a drink for him, which I shouldn't have said. She started yelling at me all the way home, pleading that she is not cheating on me with him and that I should trust her more, so I apologized. The next 2 weeks, she started talking more and more to him. She started staying up until 3 a.m. on the phone with him. And whenever I'd go into the living room to give her a kiss on the cheek or to talk to her, she'd always ask for more privacy. Originally I thought nothing about it until she started hanging out with him and I got an eerie feeling. I asked her and she would always say, "You should trust me more, don't you trust me?" Then we'd fight, something we had never done. To which I'd apologize and then feel bad for asking her about it in the first place. The fights got worse, and I got worried. One night I went to talk to her about her day, and she kept talking about Peter, and all the great things about him. So I asked her, "Is there anything about your day that doesn't have to do with Peter?" She dragged me into the kitchen and screamed at me like never before. The whole time I got flashes of my dad. I felt like I was being yelled at by him. I knew this was not the same girl whom I had fallen in love with. Something completely different. I felt like I had failed to help her, to be there for her, and to support her. I had done all that I could and now she was dead inside. And to tell you the truth, as I was looking at her face, screaming at me, I began to die inside as well. The next day, on the way home from school, we walked up to the front door of my house. I stopped us, then turned around and confronted her. I told her that I wasn't okay with what she was doing to me. I told her how I felt and that I wanted this to work out, but I was tired of getting taken advantage of. Then she turned around and left. She came back 30 minutes later and told me that she was going to be staying somewhere else. She told me that I was just like her dad, that me confronting her scared her and she couldn't be around me anymore. Guess where she stayed? That's right. Peter's. Later on, she broke up with me. I felt so horrible and yet at the same time so ironically free. In my pain, I self-destructed, and after she told me I marched into my shed and started to punch the punching bag with my bare knuckles. I had never exploded in anger before after being in pain, but at that moment I punched the bag hard. And then kept punching and never stopped. With each hit, I would grunt louder and louder, until the grunting turned into screaming, and the screaming turned into crying. I kept punching more and more until blood began to trickle down my arms. After 5 minutes, I collapsed onto the floor sobbing, holding the bag to my forehead. And that's where my mom and stepdad found me. It was something I had never done before all my life. I wore bandages around both my fists for a few months. After that, our relationship didn't blossom again for a long time. And after a while, my now ex-girlfriend told me that yeah, she was cheating on me with Peter, but they weren't talking to each other anymore. At that, I told her I understood, because I knew she was in pain and she agreed. Then we agreed to get back together again after we repaired ourselves. I grew hopeful and thought that maybe there was a chance that she'd be back to her old self. Stupid me. We flirted back and forth with each other, and my mom warned me that things didn't seem right with her and that I should wait, so I did. I gave her time to heal, all while we talked to each other and became friends. One day she told me straight to my face that she had been sleeping around with another man. She told me that she was sorry, but after that, I woke up and realized that this wasn't right. I cut her out of my life and we stopped talking to each other. She talked about me behind my back, telling her friends that I would beat her or yell at her. I was so confused. I always loved her and respected her as much as I could, and yet she was saying those things about me. It got worse a few months later when I got a new girlfriend and her friends would follow me home from school. Then one day, she texted me that she didn't want me to see my new girlfriend anymore, and when I told her that we both have our own lives she threatened to kill me. After that, we never talked to each other ever again, and still to this day we never talk. Recently I sent her a letter, telling her I forgive her for all the things she did to me, but she never replied or even mentioned it. Now I am 18 years old and I am almost done with high school. I am single and have been for about a year. The relationship with my second girlfriend didn't work out because I was still broken from my time with the first one. It has taken me a year and a half to talk about this.